another episode of Rustacean Station. I'm your host, Alan Wyma. Today I have three guests with me. I have Wilbur, Kevin, and Peter, who are students studying in Canada. I believe it's Toronto, if I remember correctly. They're working on a Minecraft server written in Rust. Is that right?
It's more of a what's called a server wrapper. It's rewriting the entire Minecraft server instead of we're writing a tool that wraps around the server executable and basically helps manage the server for the user.
Now, what's the point of writing a wrapper, right? Because I think a lot of people are running their own Minecraft servers, right? What's the point to do all this kind of work?
I guess one of the main point is the setting up a Minecraft server requires actually quite a bit of technical skills. I wouldn't say it's rocket science, but it's definitely something that requires some knowledge of computer. And also, since Minecraft server is written in Java, the user needs to also install the right version of the Java runtime. So the goal of Lodestone is to provide a all-in-one experience that just with a button click will get a Minecraft server set up locally and running for the end user without any technical knowledge.
Okay, interesting. Usually I let you guys introduce each other, and I forgot to do that this time. So why don't you guys go around and say who you are? Maybe since you guys are still in school, maybe what you're studying and how you're contributing to the project, just generally, and then we'll go back to the topic. Who's the first victim?
Yeah, so I guess we're all studying in the University of Waterloo, studying computer science. So me and Wilbur are currently in our second year, and Peter is, I believe, in his third year.
Yeah, speaking a bit more about myself, me and Kevin mostly do front end. I work mostly on the design side for Lodestone, so everything that you see in terms of user interface has been touched at some point by me. And occasionally, if I feel very adventurous, I go in and touch the code and change the styling here and there. But yeah.
And I'm the front end lead for Lodestone, so I work on the React front end and Tauri integration with Lodestone core, which is what we call our Rust backend. And I also use TRSRS to sort of integrate with the backend APIs with Rust.
Yeah, I'm also a University of Waterloo student studying computer science currently my third years. I'm mainly the Rust guy that does all the backend stuff that's written in Rust.
Okay. I'm kind of curious about your computer science program because I think they're all a little bit different, right? There's no standard program or standard style of how to study computer science. I mean, Rust is pretty new, and most universities don't really touch it. I think there's just a couple that have that, but I don't think it's like a first, second year kind of thing. Usually it's a third, fourth year kind of thing. Maybe that's where Peter got introduced to it. Is that right? Or how did you get introduced to Rust and start using it?
Actually, yeah, the Rust is so new that I'm sure there's no university that's teaching it seriously right now. One of the main things that got me into Rust is a C++ course, actually. A C++ course I would love to take. It's called CS246 for any of you Waterloo student out there. And taking that course just kind of gave me the idea that, wow, okay, so this kind of low-level programming with some abstraction is fun. And when I look around for other language, pop Rust is what people talk about with the same idea as C++, but better. So I kind of went into learning Rust with the idea that, it's just going to be kind of like a C++ replacement. I will just quickly learn it. And it turns out to be much different than that. And I got into it more and more. So yeah, that's basically how I got into Rust.
Okay. But what kind of languages do you actually use in your computer science program?
We actually for the first year, we use Racket, which is a functional language, a little like Haskell. And we are then introduced to C. And then in some upper year courses, we all use either C++ or Kotlin. So, yeah.
I've never heard of Racket. I'm surprised. I thought I heard of almost every language. Really curious. Like even the logo of Racket looks a lot like, what's it called? Like the one you just
Lambda
mentioned.
function?
Yeah, that upside down Y, right?
Mm-hmm, the Lambda, yeah.
Yeah, I'm so curious. Why Racket? I guess does it really help? Do you think to learn computer science concepts?
I think Waterloo is when it comes to computer science, we learn very obscure programming languages that are very, very theoretical and focus more on the educational side of things. We always joke around because compared to the engineering kids, they learn things like Python and Java and actually useful languages. Our professors called them street coders. But for us, when we start out with Racket, it's trying to approach it just purely in terms of functional programming. So the idea is that like it's an even playing ground so that people who have worked with imperative languages, which is most people when they're starting out, are at like the same, I guess, like level of playing field than some other people who have never studied computer science to begin with. And then also it just proves to be very useful. That course has definitely helped me in terms of understanding recursion and just understanding lambda functions and anonymous functions as applications even in libraries such as React, where you're using arrow functions and functional components and such.
Okay, that's interesting. I'm so surprised. So really, Racket is the first programming language you guys pick up in your curriculum. Okay, I don't think I've ever heard of a course where you actually have like the first language is functional, but maybe there's a couple others out there. But how did you guys feel about functional programming? I mean, to me, I love it. It must have like immutable data and the idea of what do you call that? Transforming, I think it's called, where you basically just make copies of stuff and edit that. I mean, then you go over to C, C++, it's like totally different, right? You don't feel like night and day and feel complicated when you go that way, or no?
Yeah, function programming it's known to be a hard concept for first year students. That's kind of like, they think it's the first computer science course. I think it's easy. They have some programming skill before. I think it's going and saying, oh, that's easy. But function kind of like it's a curveball to them. Yeah, like you said, it does introduce a lot of like weird concept to imperative to someone who's more used to the imperative programming style. So yeah, it is a challenge for a lot of us, but it kind of also laid the foundation for a more. I think one of the main reasons why they teach it is it lays the foundation for a mathematical, more logical approach to programming. Because in the end, the computer science program in Word is actually under the math faculty, so we actually learn a lot. We take equal amount of math course compared to our computer science course.
Okay, yeah, I forgot that there is so much math involved with this stuff because the functional programming language that I use is not typed, so anything can happen. It just breaks whenever, but that's another story. Okay, but I mean, you must be able to take some of these concepts from Racket and bring it over to Rust, I would think, right? Because they do let you do things like map and these other kinds of functions. Like Rust is definitely not OOP and it's not functional, but it's kind of like a weird mix of the two. I think there's a lot of positives and that it brings from the two different languages. Do you find some of Racket being useful to know when you start to write Rust?
Yeah, for sure. They're both the functional paradigm is very useful. It's actually the first time, probably one of the first time I've found a real world use for Racket and functional programming is to do a functional and immutability style programming in Rust. Yes, and like you said, a lot of Rust has very deep foundation, like in function programming, such as the monad type, and we have the iterator, the map function, high order function, passing function as first class citizen, all these kind of stuff. They had deep roots in functional programming.
Okay. I want to get back to the project at hand, right? Where did you guys get the idea to start doing something like this? Because Minecraft servers, as you said before, have been around for a while. Like, why is it that you want to write this wrapper to help people to do this? What's the motivation?
Yeah, I guess I could answer that as well. It was basically we had like a friend Minecraft server that just me and I host for some of our friends, including Kevin here. And it was kind of annoying because I didn't want to pay for server hosting online. So I had the server locally running on my PC. But every time I restart a PC, the server goes down and they don't come back up. And, keeping the server running in the background is kind of resource intensive. So we kind of jokingly said this idea is like, what if we can make something that's just a button? Anyone can just go in there and click the button and we'll start a server for you. So that's the old kind of original idea of Lodestone. And then we start adding ideas to it. It's like, since if there's one button, why don't we have multiple buttons to add multiple Minecrafts to manage multiple Minecraft servers? And then might as well add ability to see what the server is doing at any time with server logs and stuff. So that's kind of the origin of the Lodestone project.
Okay. Now, why did you guys decide to choose Rust out of all the different languages? Because, I mean, there's so many choices. You have a GUI-based project, right? And I don't think the GUI system for Rust is so settled necessarily. There's so many choices, right? And of course, there's no silver bullet, as we call it. So what was the driving choice for that?
So I guess our front end is very detached from the back end and it communicates through HTTPS. So I guess the front end was not really a factor in the programming language we chose. We actually just finished our C++ course from school, so we wanted to try something similar. So at the point, we had a choice between Go and Rust, and we ultimately went with Rust. If Peter, if you remember the reason that was.
Yeah, we had three choices. It was either TypeScript, Go, and Rust, like three real choices. TypeScript, I forgot why I didn't choose TypeScript, but between Go and Rust, Rust is at the time it seems like the language has a closer resemblance to C++. So we were like a learning mood, and we just chose Rust and to do the project. So it was kind of like the project started out as like a learning like excuse for us to learn new technology for all of us. So that's why we adventures route and chose Rust.
What I find to be very interesting is like you guys choose, so you just finished C++ course, it's all fresh in your mind, and you said, no, don't want to do that. Is this such a bad experience for C++? Or what was the thought process? Because usually you would choose the language you last worked with, right? And you guys studied this thing for school, right? So why not C++?
Yeah, so if you learn C++, you will know that the first part of C++, if you don't get yourself too deep into it, is actually really nice. C++ has a really nice, it's typed, it's OP, you can manipulate pointer, you can do high level abstraction with low level control. That's the whole idea. So what the school has taught is the nice part of C++, but we have seen some nasty part of C++ already. So we know if we go ahead with like building a web server and such, building this entire complex project around C++, it will be pretty detrimental to the project's growth. So that's why we didn't proceed, we didn't go with C++ because we kind of know how disastrous will be just to maintain the code.
It's interesting about the web service background, right? To me, Rust you can do in so many different places. And I think Go still has a little bit of an edge for writing web servers compared to Rust, right? As Peter's shaking his head. What was the change from Go to Rust? Because to me, I think it just makes sense. I've done a lot of Go in the back end for web servers, but not too much Rust yet. So what was the deciding factor between the two? Those are always the two that always bat heads, right? Go or versus Rust. And Go, I think, like I said, has that edge. And it's got built-in JSON, built-in HTTP, etc., right?
Yeah, so it's not, we were just, mainly I was the one doing the backend. So the entire Lodestone team originally was me and Kevin and another person doing the front end. So it was kind of up to me what server technology I choose. And to be honest with you, I really did not do much research at the time. I just said Rust looks cool and I will learn Rust just for the sake of it. So it could have been Go if I've, read up more good things about Go. But yeah, it was just basically a coin toss and Rust ends up head first.
Yeah, that's interesting because most of the articles I see on about Go are about how to tweak the GC, which I thought was a little bit weird. I don't know about if you guys have ever seen that, but it's always like, oh, how to work with the GC, how to tweak it, how to make sure it doesn't run like all the time. But I also heard you guys are using Tauri, right? So how is the experience using Tauri?
Yeah, so Tauri has actually been sort of like drop-in replacement for what actually no, it doesn't replace anything. We just wanted something similar to Electron, and Tauri was right there for us, fitting exactly our sort of tech stack with React frontend and Rust backend. And honestly, experience has been really good. We haven't really used any of Tauri's own command systems, so like their own system for communicating between the backend or frontend, since we already have, and we want to support also a web dashboard that solely communicates to the backend using HTTP and WebSocket. So we just continued using that. And Tauri simply served almost as of just like a wrapper around our existing front end backend project, and just bundles everything together to create an installer for us. It helps us to manage all the updates, lots of good things. I guess the only real issue with it is just that, well, it's not really exactly a Tauri issue, but the build time is extremely long compared to, I guess, just, I'm not too sure about Electron, but I guess compared to just a naked front end with Node.js, it is significant increase in time.
Yeah, whenever we onboard someone new onto our project, we always have like this rite of passage where they build our project using Tauri for the first time, and we always time it to see how long it takes on different laptops. I think like right now it's averaging like 3-4 minutes, I think. But it's like it's always interesting to see like how laptops perform with Tauri compilation.
Okay. Yeah, I do remember Tori. We actually had the creator of Tori come on to the podcast before. Seems pretty interesting, but I always have my doubts about, web front end and like Electron like kind of frameworks because I feel like they're so, I don't know, hacky, but I'm an old man compared to you guys. So like I was around when this stuff first started happening and the experience was pretty bad, I think. You could just tell when something was a web front end with a like wrapped. But nowadays, I mean, like if you look at Slack, which I use all the time, it works pretty well, and obviously HTML5 has helped a lot since then because that was even before H5. And yeah, so I guess it could work out. I mean, I do have a hard time to understand like how all this stuff kind of works, right? So the front end that you guys are using, what are you using for like the front end framework?
Yeah, so we have a weird mix. We're actually using Next.js for front end, but we're not using any of the server-side rendering functionality that Next.js provides.
Okay. Why Next.js? Why not just straight React?
Well, like Peter said, this entire project originated from a feature creep of a single start the Minecraft server button or I guess web API. So I guess initially we wanted to have some sort of server component where actually it's still in our roadmap today, where we want to create third part of Lodestone. We're currently planning on calling Lodestone Link, which is, I guess, a tunneling networking service to help, I guess, less experienced people setting up their Minecraft servers without port forwarding. So I guess we thought Next.js could be a good choice if we want to do some of the stuff server side, and we can do some server side rendering and generally improve the experience.
Yeah, I have to say that the UI does look really, really good. This is all thanks to Wilbur's design, is that right?
Yeah, the design you currently see is actually like I think around 3 iterations in now. So like I think like with all of us, I didn't really start with too much experience in product design. I came from a fine arts background, so I had a little bit of an idea of what looked good or bad, but to make it look good was a completely different story. So if you look at like the original iterations, we've done all our prototyping on Figma, and if you look back, it looks like basically just a toy. The fonts are too big and everything, basically just continuously implementing and then reiterating. And I think right now we're on like, I guess like almost around the third iteration, and we're planning to hopefully redesign the dashboard at least one last time and getting rid of the card system with a more functional side panel or like a left column, like left dashboard style. But like that's currently in the works, and hopefully getting some other components and things in down the line as well. But yeah, the main focus right now is getting that side panel in for the dashboard.
Okay. I mean, there's a couple different components, right? You have the actual wrapper. It sounds like it needs to be deployed onto a server of some sort, and then it looks like you have a client, right, which is built in Tori. That's how everything kind of works.
Yeah, so actually we have Tauri actually contains the client. So how it works is because our target audience is sort of people who are maybe less technically inclined, people who might not, so obviously these people, they probably don't have a server sitting somewhere or, they might not have a VPS. So we're assuming they're most people are going to be hosting this microserver on their own computer, a personal computer. So we made it so that the top client actually bundles Lodestone Core, which is our actual server wrapper, along with it. So for the average user, this is the only piece of software you ever need. But for, I guess, more professional, more technically inclined users, they can download our raw Rust Lodestone Core and deploy it to their server of choice. And they can still use the same Tauri client or even our web dashboard to connect to their server.
Okay. Do you mind to kind of like we can talk about this from just a non-technical person, right? So how do I actually download what it is I want to download? I think I saw you have a lodestone.cc domain name, but it was more like a login, I think, when I went to it. If I was somebody who wanted to set up this thing and use your product, what kind of steps and things would I need to do?
Right. So ideally, the user would go to lodestone.cc, which after a redesign will be our official landing page. So hopefully there will be a large download button right on the top of the page. I believe there currently is one already, but it's like kind of small. So I guess the average user would just simply click the button, download our Tauri installer, run installer, set up. We just call it the Lodestone, that's a Lodestone client. which is going to run actually the exact same web page as you see on lodestone.cc, except we use some of Tauri's internal communications to figure out that to have the web dashboard know that it's running inside Tauri, so it'll make a few changes to UI, skip a few steps, and then it'll actually skip directly to a first time setup page. So hopefully from that point on, they will see the picture shown in your GitHub README, see our beautiful dashboard directly.
Now, what platforms do each of these support, right? Because you have your wrapper and you have your client, right? So I'm guessing the client, if I understand correctly what you said, from lodestone.cc, I do see it now. I didn't check as clear as I thought I did. You have connect to existing course. That means that I could just connect to my existing Lodestone from here. I don't need to download the app.
Mm-hmm.
Or you can download the core, and then from that core, I can actually put that to a web server of some sort and run my Minecraft server. Is that right?
Yes, exactly. And I believe our Lodestone core actually supports all major operating systems, so Windows, Linux, and Mac. I guess anything Rust builds to. And our web dashboard supports all major browsers as well. Although one problem we did run into is that Tauri uses native WebView, which is WebKit based on Linux and Mac OS. And WebKit is not, I guess, the most friendly browser for front end to work with. It's missing a lot of HTML features. So I guess our support for the dashboard mainly supports Windows for Chrome-based browsers right now, and it's sort of like in beta on WebKit for now.
So this is a good topic, right? Because people have been talking pretty good things about Tauri, and I would love to hear like the negative side, right? Because I'm not trying to ditch on the project, but I would like people to know, somebody actually uses it, and you said there's some problems you have. What are the problems so people know before they get into it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess one of Tauri's, I think it was actually one of their selling point is that they don't bundle Chromium along, so they're relatively small compared to Electron. I believe that is the case, but I guess that could also be a downside, especially because Chromium is such, I guess it might be controversial, but it's such a stable and up-to-date browser, and you can expect most things to simply work. Whereas the Tauri builds to uses native WebView, so it could be different on multiple different systems. And like I said, it's WebKit in a lot of cases. So especially for us, because I guess we don't really own a Mac, so it could be hard to test what the Tauri application might look like on different operating systems.
That's interesting because Mac is somewhat popular, I guess. But of course, if you're a gamer, usually you have a Windows machine somewhere. Have you guys gotten complaints about things not working properly on Mac or even Linux? Now, how do you handle this kind of situation? Nobody owns a Mac in the team, right?
Definitely. We've been recently recruiting, or not really recruiting, but we're getting new team members on board who now owns. So now we have someone who owns a Mac and is responsible for sort of maintenance in that area. We have been getting feedbacks from our Linux and Mac users that the web page doesn't look right, or sometimes it crashes because WebKit is missing some regex, maybe, etc. But I believe, yeah, I guess there is value in knowing exactly what your application looks like on multiple platforms.
Yeah, to speak a little bit more about the WebKit issue, I guess from like a user standpoint, escaping from like the Chromium, Big Brother Chromium is, something that's very appealing. But from a design and implementation standpoint, this is like a living nightmare. As Peter mentioned, he typed this in the chat, but I got a Mac for my co-op work, which is what I'm currently on. So we were just testing it one night just to see what happened, and we launched Open Safari, and the first thing we noticed is that our app immediately crashes because we're using this regex expression that like Safari and WebKit just does not support. I actually launched with that for like release on our /Rust. We actually launched with that, but then we realized that a surprising amount of users actually use Linux, which means that they use WebKit. We pushed a fix for that in like the first week, but we're still running into a bunch of like graphical issues, the buttons not being styled correctly or rounded, the text looking too bold or too slim, and things like that. And every time I look at it as a designer, some part of me dies a little bit inside.
Now, how do you work around these issues, right? Because I think there's some things like polyfills, things like that, that may be able to help. I'm not too sure. I haven't had to deal with this stuff. Usually, everybody's using Chrome, and I don't use Tauri, so I don't. At least I haven't used it yet. So, how do you guys handle these indiscrepancies between the native web views?
I guess we currently just don't, because Well, I guess the views are usually pretty up to date, and so it's not really a major concern for us as of now.
Yeah, our priority currently is just trying to implement and develop as fast as possible just to get features out so users can test them. And then, after a month or two after the hype dies down, we're focusing on like stability improvements and bringing wider range support for more browsers and operating systems.
Now, sorry, Peter, but they're putting you underneath the bus. They're asking you to talk about Rust more. Is there something more you want to say about Rust? Because I'm kind of curious about more about how's the experience and everything so far.
Yeah. So I think looking back at it was hindsight. I said this many times to my team. They're really tired of me mentioning Rust over and over and over again. But I think just by accident, choosing Rust is one of the it's the language. It's the most perfect language we could have choose, because whenever we need something, we can just, there's already a project that does exactly what we want. We wanted a kind of a desktop client, and we just look out and just, we have Tauri already. And we literally just install Tauri, and we can't, because there's no inter-process communication between Rust and Rust. We just include it as a dependency. It was so simple to get Tauri set up at the start. And since Tauri was a bunch of nice features such as, Windows, like all the major platform installers, a builder for all the major platform installers, it was one of the best choice we could have made. We sap everything to Tauri and run Tauri build, and it splits out, and we were just surprised. I was like, wow, just works. That's very nice experience we had with Tauri. And also another thing was Deno was the JavaScript TypeScript runtime was also written in Rust. We will actually be able to just pull that in to do our macro/scripting system. So both of these choices, no, we could not have thought to at the start, foresee at the start of the project, but it ended up with hindsight. It ended up being a very compelling reason to use Rust, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely makes sense. I think creating installers is definitely tricky. And it sounds like so many things that just work out of the box for Tauri, right? So that's a huge thing. I'd like to talk a little bit more about the core or the wrapper, because that one has some web components to it. Can you talk about which crates you're actually using?
We are using Axum for all the web server stuff, and that's it. It comes with WebSocket support. It's super nice. The project was first written in Rocket, but there were some problem with it. First, it was not well maintained enough for us. It was kind of lacking behind. And second, more detrimentally, the lack of WebSocket support, like native WebSocket support, really killed it for us. One of our key selling features that will be able to live update all the dashboard at once. Like no matter how many people are looking at this saying Lodestone core, they should get the same state. So to achieve that, we decided to go with WebSocket. Rocket just does not support WebSocket, and the kind of update cycle has been, so we wrote the entire backend, entire Lodestone core into Axum, and has been really great so far. I've actually written some web server colon for school in other language, such as Go for work, and Rust has proven to be Axum has proven to be very robust, and yeah, so far.
Now, why choose Axum, right? I feel like a lot of people are choosing Actix Web. I'm sure they have some WebSocket already, but you have to use Actix, I think, to make it work. Why Axum over, say, Actix or not Hyper, Warp, or these other ones? There's so many different frameworks out there now.
Yeah, so we first chose Rocket because people say it's the easiest framework to get into and has great documentation, which we really did. And we chose Axum. I briefly looked into Actix. I ultimately chose Axum over Actix because first, Axum has tiny bit better documentation and community support at the time. And second, Actix, what's called an actor-based framework, and I do not really understand how that works. Axum seems more like a traditional style web framework, and looked like it's easier to pick it up. So I just went with that. It has everything we needed. It has HTTPS support. It has WebSocket support. It has some authentication library building around it already.
Now, that's interesting. I'm surprised that actors are not something a little bit more pronounced since you came from Racket, because actors, I think, are very much good complement to functional programming. Have you since learned about actors, or I can give you a quick rundown about how they work?
Yeah, please do. I have no idea what it is till this day.
Yeah, yeah. So the way actors work is that, like with objects, right? You can easily call methods on them, and you can even like with Java, right? If you have public, what do you call those properties, you can obviously touch those and you can change them without actually calling methods. But even with like getters and setters, right? If you get it and you're just pointing to that, you can still mutate it. The way actors work is that you have your own copy of the data, and if you ever want to like, you know, access that copy, you have to send a copy to somebody else. So it really helps when you're doing a lot of concurrency and parallelism because every actor or process has its own copy of the data. So you'll never really have this problem where people are writing to the same piece. Obviously, you can use mutexes to solve this or other kinds of things, but actors is just one way to do it. And since you're using Axiom, I'm sure you must be using Tokyo, right? Yeah. So there's an article about how you can do actors with Tokyo, written by one of the Tokyo members. You can check it out. Like I said, I know a lot about actors because I'm working with a functional programming language that uses the actor pattern out of the box. And they actually didn't know they were using the actor pattern until much later because they just thought this was the right idea to do concurrency and it just works out pretty well for them. Yeah, I mean, how's the WebSocket support in Axiom? Because actually, I don't hear a lot of people talking about WebSockets within Rust so much as they are talking about APIs. So what has I mean, is it like I don't know how to even say this. I mean, how does it work? I mean, does it work well? Can you tell me anything about it? Because really I haven't heard anybody talking about it.
It works really well, surprisingly. I mean, it's not surprisingly, but it works really well. It's basically you hit an endpoint, and in Axiom, you set up that endpoint as a WebSocket endpoint, and then you just open the string, and the string has a sender and receiver to send message to the WebSocket and receive message to the WebSocket. And we just send, for our case, we just send JSON objects to the WebSocket. And then the front end can take that and just decode it, and yeah, everything works right out of the box. A little fun fact about me is before starting this project, I didn't know what a web, like even HTTP request is. So it's kind of a learning by doing. A lot of this is me learning ad hoc, on the fly. But the but I was able to pick stuff up really, really quickly and really smoothly and learn a lot of new concepts this way, including WebSocket. Never worked with it before, used it first time, and learn it actually use it first time was Axiom, and it's been super nice so far.
Okay. Yeah. WebSockets are definitely I mean, they're not new, but they're not really utilized so much, but I think they're pretty efficient, right? Because it just keeps the connection and you just basically keep sending heartbeats and those are basically nothing compared to other things. So it's pretty straightforward. Let's actually keep on to this part, right? So I'm guessing using Tokyo. Of course, you got Hyper, Axiom. We talked about the client has Tauri. What other kinds of popular crates are you using? I'm guessing probably Serde, right, for doing the serialization and deserialization. Anything else?
Yeah, so beside all those things you mentioned, Certain for Serious that's like a bog standard thing for all Rust project. And I gotta say, having worked with kind of Kotlin/Java ecosystem to do serialization, Rust is definitely like a breath of fresh air for me. It's again, I cannot describe it any more than it just works, right? Everything just works. You can deserialize it and you can do error handling with it. Do serialization with it. You could do error handling with it. Everything is super nice. Another big crate. I mean, it's not a popular crate, I don't think, but another very big crate that contributes to half the dependency count is Deno, right? That's how we are basically a feature of Lodestone is to be able to run some kind of TypeScript code. And Lodestone will interpret that TypeScript code was Deno, was binding in Rust. And that's how we are doing basically user scriptable, like kind of like mods, right? To Lodestone, to change the behavior of Lodestone and to change the behavior of the server that Lodestone is managing.
I mean, I don't know if these are big crates, but we're also using TSRS to generate, I guess, TypeScript bindings. Oh, and also, I guess, just add on to Serde, like, I guess the meta programming of his macros is really nice, and just being able to write sort of JSON literals in the code and having that work is really nice for the developer experience.
Now, Kevin also that we should talk about the macro system, I mean, does this mean that you guys are writing your own macros?
Oh no, macro is kind of a bad name. It's think of it more as a scripting system. It has nothing to do with the macro system in Rust. The idea is that the user will be able to write a TypeScript file, and Lodestone will interpret that TypeScript file and do certain action with it. So one of the first idea you can achieve this system is basically a generic instance. That's what I call it. Basically, instead of having the user waiting for us to implement support for other games they want to manage, they can write a piece of TypeScript code and Lodestone will run it with Deno, and the TypeScript code will say, okay, grab this file from this URL and run this file when you're ready. And yeah, so that's kind of the idea behind the scripting system. The script system also can tap into existing instance to say listen to events for microserver. The script can be activated when, say, a microplayer joined. Maybe when they join, just automatically send a message to that player greeting them to join the server.
Kevin, I think maybe you can be my guest host because you have a lot of things that you think we should talk about. Now, you talk about Lua versus the interpreter in Rust, right? So what do you exactly mean?
Well, I'm just like thinking about like all the things Peter rambles to us about, like all the little Rust discoveries and like things he's made. But I guess the macro system, where I guess I would call the script system, had actually gone through about 2 stages. So first, initially we used Lua as our scripting language, and then later on we switched to TypeScript, and we used, I guess it was kind of surprising that we found, oh, Deno is written in Rust, so we can just like literally grab the entire crate and put it in our project. And obviously, I think we feel like TypeScript has a better developer experience, I guess, generally. And I guess, Peter, you can talk more about that.
Peter, they just
Oh
want
yeah.
underneath the bus, it seems like, but go ahead.
Oh yeah, it's been a while, right? This is one of the most like complicated feature I've like personally worked on. You were right, we have 2 generations, but there was actually another one at the start. It was like a machine code style scripting language. It's actually still in the source code. If you dig deep enough into the Lodestone core source code, you will see a macro language specifier. So just to give us some context, the macro idea was inspired kind of by me taking a compiler class in University of Waterloo, where they got us to basically write a compiler or /interpreter for a toy language that looks like C. So it kind of just hit me one day that what if we can build this feature into Rust and have you basically user community generated content now. So yeah, at the start it was a machine style language that basically we just use regular expression to grab different parts of the command and run it in Rust. And then we quickly realized that's not going to be enough. No one's going to run machine code, no one's going to run machine code for us. So we switched to Lua, basically, and then now we are able to the user is able to write some Lua script to control the behavior of Lodestone. And after a bit, it worked, and since Lodestone wasn't released at that point, so we didn't really give it too much thought. We kind of just put it aside. And then one day I saw a post on Reddit, Ashraf saying, "Did you know that you can just use Deno like a scripting engine for your Rust project?" And that hit me. I never thought of it before. I knew Deno was written in Rust. Everyone knew Deno was written in Rust. We have a project written in Rust looking for a scripting engine and that just hit me. And I spent like a solid day trying to get Deno integrated. It was kind of a pain because they obviously didn't build their crate around this use case. It's kind of more for their internal Deno use. So here we are right now. The Lodestone scripting engine supports both TypeScript and JavaScript code, and you can interop between them pretty perfectly.
Okay. I mean, it could be a little bit dangerous, right? Letting people run whatever kind of code you want. Do you have any kind of like sandboxing or any kind of stopping people from doing certain things?
We do. We have an entire permission system to isolate basically what a user can do and cannot do. So one of the things we decided to do is that this is like kind of a special permission called owner permission. That's when the owner permission is only granted to the user that first set up the Lodestone core. And so the entire being able to run macro action, being able to run script action is owner exclusive. So no one else can say log into your Lodestone core and just start running JavaScript, right? It was something that we quickly realized we shouldn't be able to do. And we are also planning to maybe isolate the Deno runtime a little bit more, because Deno runtime actually allows us to say, run the script, this context, which means the script cannot interact. You can say this script cannot interact with the file system, this script cannot HTTP. Yeah, so that's the next thing we're looking to make the scripting system more safe.
Okay. Yeah. I do have one last question. And I always think about security, right? Does this automatically add like HTTPS and certificates and make sure that it's safe and encrypted so nobody can eavesdrop or do any kind of malicious things?
Yeah, so that's currently planned. I guess, there's a fundamental contradiction between having this, running on the end user's like home laptop and running Minecraft servers, hopefully with mod support, which is just arbitrary binaries. So, that's kind of a fundamental contradiction there. And like Peter said, currently our solution is with a permission system, and hopefully just not allowing people to, other than trusted individuals, to do that. In terms of HTTPS, it's a little hard to do because the user needs to, port forward their servers first, and also they might not have a domain. So that's currently a planned feature of Lodestone Link, which is our like sort of networking solution. We want to give user a subdomain under our, maybe Lodestone.link. We can give them a subdomain based if they register an account, and we can automatically set up HTTPS under that subdomain. And and we'll sort of manage everything and say, okay, only if the owner is logged in, only if they're logged into a core can this core get the certificate from our like, maybe central database, or can modify DNS on their subdomain.
Sorry, I was just trying to look up something.
Mm-hmm.
There is something made by Cloudflare that may be something you want to take a look at. So have you ever heard of client authentication using certificates? Yeah, I know about the concept. What you may consider is that you can actually use client certificates to authenticate between services. So there's no need to use like username, password, whatever. And actually you can generate these yourself, including the signing certificate, whatever. So that may be a path that you can take a look at. So you can say, okay, this is the client, this person, and then on the server side, you can say, okay, allow these clients to connect. And also, because you have that certificate authentication, it will also encrypt the data so nobody can kind of eavesdrop in between. So you may want to take a look at this. I forgot the name, but I believe it's created by Cloudflare. There's a book about this from Prague. They talk about how to do this in Go, but actually, it's not actually done within Go itself necessarily. Like it's not Go specific thing. In fact, generating certificates is not related to Go at all. It's just like they show you how to do it in Go with client certificate and authentication. And it helps, I think, with this kind of problem. And it may be an easy solution for you guys to drop in. Just throwing it out there, you'll find out yourself.
Yeah, that's definitely very interesting. But I guess another thing we run into is that our web dashboard Lodestone.cc is served over HTTPS, so the browser doesn't allow mixed context by default. Yeah, so the browser needs one signed SSL certificate from all the courses.
If you can load like another certificate into it, you may be able to bypass this problem. I know what you're saying, right? But for sure, you can add certificates to your browser, but I'm not sure how you would do that within Tauri and if you can. I'm sure it should be possible. You may even want to drop an issue onto Tauri project and see if they're interested in that, because the corporates have their own certificates that they sign. It's a very common thing to have. So I can't imagine they would say no to that because of the corporate thing. Like when I worked at a bank, we actually never had a username password. We would just log into our computer, of course, username password. But then we had all of our computers all had local client certificates. So as soon as you went to a website, it knew who you were based on your browser because you had a client certificate already there that you were using. So it made life a lot easier. So I can't imagine that they wouldn't be able to support something like this.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's definitely something we can look into. But I guess we are targeting people with maybe not a lot of technical
Sure.
knowledge. Also, in the web browser, I guess that's a lot of limitations on this. But there's something very interesting. I've never heard of this.
Yeah, like I
Definitely
said,
going
it
to
may be
look
something
into.
that you would do in part of your installation or part of your compilation steps when you bundle everything, bundle certificate creator, whatever, and yeah, let your program to do the work for you, and so then you wouldn't have this kind of problem. Then
Hmm.
you're basically set, right? You don't need to have a HTTPS. You don't need to talk to Let's Encrypt. You can just run this, and maybe it'll work, right? I understand the problem. That's why I'm saying maybe this will help because you don't need to have all these extra steps.
Yeah, definitely.
If people are interested in Lodestone or connecting with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you or to check out the project?
Definitely Discord. Actually, we have like we have like 10 people in our Discord already. But if you like talk to us about Lodestone, if you like to do feature session, like you need help setting up Lodestone because right now everything's a little murky, definitely join our Discord where we're gonna be there waiting for you guys.
And you can find our Discord on our GitHub organization page, which is Lodestone-team. We have lots of links on top, including download and Discord and wiki, etc., right on our README. So that's where you can go to check out most of our things.
Cool. Yeah. Is there anything else you guys wanted to let people know before we end? I think we went through basically everything, how to contact you guys and everything else. So just give me the last chance.
I think that's everything.
Awesome.
Well, I guess the project's still in active development. We have a lot of features planned, and we're still, very early in the stages of development, and we're still learning as well. So, I guess it doesn't look too good right now. Maybe come back in a year. Hopefully, we have something better.
It doesn't look too good. Then talk to Wilbur, right? Wilbur's the man.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we're always looking for more experienced designers to join us because right now it's just me serving up everyone. So,
Awesome.
design experience.
Yeah, some better taste, right? But no, it looks great already. I'm pretty sad that I don't have that much design skills and I'm a CS student. So I think it's because your art background helped out a lot. Again, thank you guys for joining, and I hope that Lodestone keeps going. And thanks for the practical background about how it's been going for you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.